Rain poured in sheets, hammering the windshield of Naomi Brooks's small sedan as she drove along the winding road. The wipers struggled to keep up, swishing back and forth with frantic urgency. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles pale, but her eyes stayed alert. She had just finished a long shift at the hospital, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed, but the storm seemed determined to stretch the journey. Through the downpour, a sudden glare of twisted headlights caught her eye on the far side of the road. Naomi slowed down, leaning forward to see more clearly. Her stomach clenched. There, barely visible through the rain, was a car crumpled against the guardrail. Steam hissed from the engine, and shards of broken glass reflected faint light in the storm. Her instincts as a nurse pushed aside her exhaustion. She pulled over, slammed her gear into park, and grabbed the small flashlight she always kept in her bag. The storm lashed against her as she opened the door, soaking her scrubs within seconds. She didn't care. Someone was trapped in that wreck, and time was precious. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she rushed toward the car. The driver's door was bent inward, the window shattered. With trembling fingers, Naomi shone the light inside and saw a man slumped against the steering wheel, motionless. The seatbelt pinned him in place, blood running down his temple. Her heart raced. He wasn't moving. She whispered a quick prayer under her breath and yanked at the door handle. It didn't budge. Summoning all her strength, she pulled again until, with a groan of metal, the door creaked open enough for her to reach in. The man's chest rose faintly, but his breaths were shallow and irregular. Naomi's pulse quickened. This was no longer about a stranger in a wreck. It was a life hanging by a thread in her hands. Naomi leaned into the car, her hands steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Stay with me," she whispered, though the man's head slumped lifelessly to the side. She quickly unlatched the seatbelt, easing his heavy frame forward, careful not to worsen his injuries. The rain beat down harder, soaking both of them as she dragged him free from the wreck. Laying him on the wet asphalt, Naomi checked for a pulse. Weak, fading, she lowered her ear to his mouth, her heart dropping. His breathing was shallow, almost gone. Fear pressed on her, but years of training pushed her to act. She tilted his head back, cleared his airway, and began chest compressions. Her palms pressed firmly against his chest, counting each push in her head. 1, 2, 3. The storm seemed to fade into the background as she focused entirely on him. "Come on, breathe," she pleaded, her voice breaking. She gave 2 quick rescue breaths, her lips trembling as she pulled back to watch his chest rise. Nothing. She pressed again, harder this time, her arms aching, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Her whispered prayers spilled out between compressions. "Please, Lord, don't let him die here. Give him another chance." Each word carried the weight of her faith and desperation. She had seen patients slip away before, but she refused to let this stranger's story end on a deserted road. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Naomi pressed down, again and again, whispering his name, though she didn't even know it. Her voice cracked, but her determination never wavered. She bent low once more, giving another breath, then listened. At first, nothing. Then the faintest gasp broke the silence, followed by a shallow cough. His chest rose weakly, his body shuddering back to life. Naomi's hands froze as relief flooded her, her tears now flowing freely. She placed a trembling hand against his cheek and whispered, "Thank you." Naomi steadied him as his body jerked with a rough cough, his breath ragged like someone surfacing from deep water. She kept her hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall grow stronger, though uneven. Relief poured through her, but she stayed alert. Head trauma, blood loss. He wasn't safe yet. His eyelids fluttered, heavy as if weighted down by the storm itself. Slowly they lifted, revealing grey eyes clouded with confusion. He blinked against the rain falling on his face, his gaze struggling to focus. For a moment, Naomi thought he might slip back into unconsciousness, but then his lips parted. "Why, did you save me?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, yet it struck her harder than the thunder above. Naomi froze, caught off guard. She expected fear, or maybe a plea for help, not this, an almost accusatory question, as if survival was something he didn't want. Her throat tightened. "You were dying," she said softly, brushing damp hair away from his forehead. "I couldn't just leave you there." His eyes searched hers, filled with something deeper than pain. There was bitterness, exhaustion, but also a trace of longing, as if her answer mattered more than she realized. For a split second, Naomi felt an unfamiliar pull between them, a spark that defied reason. Another cough racked his chest, forcing him to close his eyes again. Naomi shifted closer, steadying his head with her hands. "Stay awake," she urged gently. "Help is coming." But his question lingered in the air, echoing in her mind even as the rain washed over them both. "Why did you save me?" She didn't know him, didn't know his story, yet something about the way he asked it left her unsettled. Naomi kept pressing a steady hand to his chest, ensuring he remained conscious as the storm raged around them. His breathing, though laboured, was proof of life. In that fragile moment, caught between near death and survival, her heart slowed enough for the weight of it all to sink in. She had pulled a man back from the edge, and that's where our story begins. Welcome to Mr. Ashford's Love Stories, where moments like this remind us why compassion matters more than wealth or power. If you're joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. If you've been with us before, thank you for coming back. Stories like Naomi's show us that a single act of courage can change more than one life. It can alter destiny itself. This is a tale of love, sacrifice, and choices that echo far beyond the moment they're made. Before we continue, don't forget, subscribe now so you never miss a story that speaks to the heart. Before we dive deeper into Naomi and Cole's story, let me ask you this. Do you believe compassion has the power to change destinies? Naomi didn't know who she was saving that night. She didn't know his wealth, his name, or the weight of his past. All she saw was a life slipping away, and she refused to let it go. If you believe small acts of kindness can shape the future, take a moment now. Tap that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us if you've ever witnessed a simple act of compassion change someone's path. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe so you'll always be here for stories that stir your heart and remind you of what truly matters. Because tonight, Naomi's choice didn't just save a life, it set in motion a journey neither of them expected. Naomi's shoes splashed through the rising puddles as she fought her way toward the wreck. The rain stung her face, blinding her with every gust, but she refused to slow down. The beam of her flashlight shook in her hand, barely cutting through the curtain of water. Ahead, the car leaned against the guardrail, the front crushed like paper. Her heart pounded, both from fear and urgency. She'd seen accidents in the emergency room before, but this was different. She was alone, with no team, no supplies, no time. Her breath came in short bursts as she yanked harder at the mangled door. It groaned in protest, but finally shifted open enough for her to squeeze inside. The man's face came into view under the dim light. His skin was pale, his forehead cut and bleeding. Naomi leaned closer, calling out, "Sir, can you hear me?" There was no answer, not even a flicker of movement. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber filled her nose, but she didn't retreat. Adrenaline surged as she unbuckled his seatbelt and carefully pulled his body free. The storm howled around her, but all she could think of was keeping him alive. Naomi lowered him onto the cold, rain-soaked pavement, her knees hitting the ground beside him. The storm hammered down, but her focus narrowed to the man lying still before her. His chest barely moved, each shallow rise weaker than the last. She pressed 2 fingers against his neck, her pulse racing faster when she found his heartbeat faint and slipping. Her training kicked in. With trembling hands, she interlocked her fingers and began compressions, each push forcing her body weight down against his chest. "Stay with me," she urged, counting under her breath to keep the rhythm steady. Her arms ached almost immediately, the storm adding weight to every move, but she refused to stop. After 30 compressions, she tilted his head back, sealed her lips over his, and breathed air into his lungs. For a few seconds, nothing changed. He stayed motionless, water streaming over his face. Naomi's throat tightened, but she pressed again, harder, faster, whispering prayers through clenched teeth. "Please, don't let this be the end for him. Give him another chance." She gave another breath, then another. Suddenly, his chest jerked. A rough cough escaped his lips, followed by a shallow gasp. Naomi froze, her eyes widening in relief, then quickly steadied him on his side as his body convulsed weakly. "You're back," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. Her hands shook, but her resolve only grew stronger. She had pulled life from silence. A low groan rumbled from his throat as his eyelids fluttered against the rain. Naomi leaned closer, steadying his head with gentle hands. His grey eyes cracked open, hazy and unfocused, but searching. For a brief moment they locked with hers, and Naomi felt a jolt of awareness pass through her. His lips parted, the words rough and almost broken. "Why did you save me?" Naomi blinked, stunned. Of all the things he might have asked, where he was, what happened, who she was, this wasn't it. The question carried more than confusion. There was bitterness there, a kind of weariness that told her this man had been carrying a weight long before the crash. "You were dying," she answered softly, her voice steady, though her heart still pounded. "I couldn't walk away." He studied her through half-lidded eyes, as if her reply unsettled him. His chest rose with another shallow breath, his body trembling under the storm. For a moment, Naomi thought he might pass out again, but he clung to her, words with faint stubbornness, as though searching for proof in her face. The question lingered between them, heavy and strange. "Why did you save me?" Naomi had no answer beyond the truth she lived by. Every life had value, no matter who it belonged to. Naomi pressed her hand against his shoulder, steadying him as his breathing grew more even. The storm hadn't eased, but the danger had shifted, from certain death to fragile survival. She could feel her pulse racing, but her resolve held firm. She didn't know his name, his background, or why his first words carried so much pain. None of it mattered in that moment. She had seen a life about to slip away, and she had fought to hold it. That was all. Compassion, she believed, was never meant to be selective. It wasn't about wealth, titles, or recognition. It was about stepping in when someone needed help, even if no one else was watching. Her mother had drilled that lesson into her heart, and tonight proved it true again. As Naomi brushed the rain from her face, she looked at him with quiet conviction. He might never understand why she saved him, but she did. Because humanity is measured by how we treat one another when there's nothing to gain in return. With that thought, she tightened her grip on his hand, refusing to let him slip away again. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the quiet hospital room. Cole Harrington lay propped against the pillows, his body swathed in bandages, his face still pale from the accident. The storm outside had long passed, but he carried another one within himself. When Naomi entered with the nurse's clipboard tucked under her arm, his eyes flicked toward her, sharp and unwelcoming. "You again?" he muttered, his voice low but laced with irritation. "Haven't you done enough?" Naomi blinked at his words, but didn't flinch. She set the chart aside and stepped closer, her tone calm. "I'm here to check on your vitals," Cole scoffed, shifting uncomfortably against the mattress. "Vitals? What's the point? You should have let me go on that road." His lips twisted into a half-smile that wasn't kind. "Would have saved you the trouble of dealing with me?" Naomi's chest tightened at the coldness in his tone. Most patients clung to life after such a close call, grateful to still be breathing. But this man, this Heir with a sharp tongue, treated survival like a punishment. "I don't regret pulling you out of that car," she said softly, adjusting the IV line. "You may not see it now, but you were given another chance." His grey eyes narrowed, sarcasm dripping from his next words. "Another chance to live a life that doesn't belong to me? What a blessing!" Naomi studied him quietly, refusing to rise to the bitterness in his tone. Behind the mask of sarcasm, she sensed something deeper, a man hiding behind walls built too high for most to climb. The next morning, Cole's sharpness hadn't faded. He kept his gaze fixed on the ceiling whenever Naomi entered. His tone clipped whenever she asked how he felt. Most nurses would have handed the case off, tired of the pushback, but Naomi didn't. She walked in carrying a fresh glass of water and set it gently on the table by his bed. "You need to stay hydrated," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. He glanced at the glass, then at her, his brows lifting with faint amusement. "Do you always fuss over strangers?" "Only the ones who refuse to take care of themselves," she replied, checking the monitor. She noted his pulse, his oxygen level, the slow improvement that he pretended not to notice. He turned his head away, muttering, "Waste of your time." Naomi didn't argue. Instead, she pulled the blanket higher over his chest and whispered under her breath, a prayer for patience and healing. She had said similar prayers for countless patients, but this time her words carried a strange weight. She wanted this man, not just his body, but whatever burden pressed on his soul, to heal. Hours passed in silence, broken only by her small acts of care. She replaced his IV bag, adjusted the blinds when the sunlight grew too harsh, and sat quietly by his side when he closed his eyes. He might never admit it, but each time he stirred, his gaze flickered to check if she was still there. Naomi didn't miss it. She didn't push, didn't pry. She let her steady presence speak louder than any words. Late in the evening, Naomi stepped into Cole's room with a routine chart in hand, expecting the same silence and sarcasm. Instead, she found him awake, his eyes shadowed but alert, staring out the window at the hospital parking lot lights. "You should rest," she said quietly. Cole gave a short laugh that lacked humour. "Rest? That's easy for you to say." His gaze stayed fixed on the glass, his reflection staring back at him. "I can't rest. Even when my body is broken, I don't get peace." Naomi paused, setting the chart aside. Something in his voice told her not to brush it off. "What keeps you awake?" she asked. He turned toward her then, his eyes hard but his voice low. "My family." The words were heavy, dragging more than simple irritation. He leaned back against the pillow, his jaw tight. "I'm their only son, the one expected to carry the Harrington name, to run the empire, to obey without question. Do you know what it's like to have your life planned before you even breathe your first word?" Naomi shook her head gently. "No, I don't." Cole let out a bitter sigh. "Every choice I've ever made has been judged. Who I talk to, who I date, who I marry, already decided. My father believes money is the only legacy worth protecting, and my mother, she pretends she agrees. though sometimes I think she knows I'm suffocating." He pressed a hand to his bandaged side, wincing. "I walked away from them months ago. I couldn't take the control anymore. They see me as ungrateful, but I'd rather be a disgrace than a puppet." Naomi stood still, absorbing his confession. The coldness she had faced from him in the hospital room wasn't anger. At her, it was armor forged from years of expectation and rejection. For the first time, she didn't see the billionaire heir the world admired. She saw a man trapped by chains invisible to anyone who didn't live his life. Naomi pulled the chair closer to his bed and sat, her hands folded in her lap. Cole's words about his family lingered in the quiet room, and for a moment she debated whether to share her own story. But something in his eyes, restless, guarded, yet hungry for honesty, gave her courage. "I didn't grow up with much," she began softly. "It was just my mother and me. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, so I could stay in school. We didn't have fancy dinners or new clothes, but she gave me something I've learned is more valuable than money." Cole's gaze shifted to her, curious despite himself. "And what's that?" "Love, honesty, a sense of worth that didn't depend on what we owned." Naomi smiled faintly, remembering late nights at the kitchen table, her mother's tired but patient voice helping her study. She used to say, "We may not have wealth, but we can give kindness, and that will carry further than dollars ever will." Cole studied her, his expression unreadable. "So you never wanted more?" "Of course I wanted more," Naomi admitted. "There were days I wished for easier choices, fewer bills stacked on the counter, less worry in my mother's eyes. But those struggles taught me what matters. They taught me to work hard, to care for people, and to never measure someone's worth by their bank account." Her words settled between them, quiet but strong. Naomi knew her background might seem small compared to his, but she didn't shrink from it. Instead, she met his eyes steadily, showing him that she carried no shame in where she came from. For the first time, Cole didn't answer with sarcasm. He only stared, the wall around him shifting ever so slightly. The nights in the hospital stretched long. Most patients slept soundly under the dim lights, but Cole rarely closed his eyes. Naomi often found him awake, staring at the ceiling or lost in thought. One evening she paused at the doorway, debating whether to enter. His voice cut through the silence. "You don't sleep much either, do you?" She smiled faintly and stepped inside. "Nurses don't really get the luxury." To her surprise, he shifted, making space for her to sit at the edge of the bed. What began as small talk, complaints about hospital food, his sarcastic remarks about the scratchy sheets, slowly turned into something deeper. Naomi listened as he confessed the loneliness of his upbringing, how wealth had never filled the emptiness at his core. In return, she shared pieces of her own life, her dreams of travelling, the burden of medical bills, her mother's unshakable faith. Somewhere between his bitterness and her quiet resilience, they found common ground. A laugh broke from him when she teased him about his terrible taste in music, and the sound startled them both. It was the first time his guard slipped completely. Naomi's eyes lifted to his, and for a moment the tension shifted. The sarcasm was gone. In its place was something softer, something searching. The air between them grew heavier, not with words unspoken, but with a pull neither dared to name. His gaze lingered a little longer, hers held a little steadier, and oh, no, lines were crossed. The beginning of something new had quietly taken root. Before we move forward, let me ask you, do you believe love can truly cross social classes? Naomi and Cole came from 2 completely different worlds, yet here they were, finding connection in a hospital room. Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you're still with us, and subscribe so you never miss another story that proves love can grow where no one expects it. Cole's recovery moved faster than the doctors expected, though his stubbornness likely had more to do with it than medicine. Within days, he was sitting upright, his sharp humour returning though, softened now with traces of gratitude he couldn't quite hide. Naomi noticed it in the way his sarcasm lost its bite, in the way his eyes followed her as she moved about the room. One evening, as she adjusted his bandages, he broke the silence with a voice that carried both determination and hesitation. "Naomi, I owe you more than I can ever repay." She shook her head, brushing the comment aside. "You don't owe me anything. You survived. That's enough." But Cole didn't relent. "No," he said firmly, leaning forward despite the wince of pain it caused. "I need to thank you properly. Not with money, not with flowers or some hospital gift basket. I want you to come with me, to my estate." Naomi froze, startled. "Your estate?" "Yes." He met her eyes, his gaze steady. "When I'm discharged, I want you there. I don't care what anyone says. I wouldn't be here if not for you, and I want you to see the place I call home, even if it feels more like a prison most days." Her heart skipped. She hadn't expected this. Patients expressed gratitude in cards, in warm words, sometimes even small donations to the hospital. But this, an invitation into the private world of a billionaire heir, was something else entirely. Naomi tried to keep her tone professional. "Cole, that's not necessary. You're still healing, and "It is necessary," he interrupted, his voice low but unwavering. "Please, let me do this. Not as some grand gesture, but because I want you there." His last words softened the air between them. Naomi felt her chest tighten with something she couldn't name. Against her better judgment, she saw sincerity in his expression, and it unsettled her more than his earlier coldness ever had. Naomi stared at him, her pulse quickening. An invitation like this was more than unexpected. It was dangerous. She could already hear the whispers if anyone at the hospital found out. A nurse being swept into the home of her wealthy patient? To some, it would look like opportunism. To others, scandal. She folded her arms, trying to steady herself. "Cole, do you realize what people would say if I went with you? They'll think I'm chasing after your name, your money. And I'm not." His grey eyes softened, the harshness she had come to expect absent now. "I know who you are, Naomi. You're the only person in weeks who hasn't treated me like a Harrington heir. You saved me when you didn't even know my name. That's why I'm asking you, not because of how it looks, but because I trust you more than anyone else." Her breath caught at his words. Trust. It had been so long since anyone had said that to her with sincerity. Still, she hesitated. She thought of her mother's warnings, of the gossip that clung to small-town streets, of her own resolve never to get tangled in the world of the wealthy. Yet when she looked at him, his bandaged body, his guarded but pleading expression, her resistance wavered. She remembered the night on the road, the feel of his heartbeat finally returning under her hands. Something inside her told her this wasn't about wealth or appearances. This was about a man reaching for something genuine in a life full of falsehoods. She exhaled slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "All right, Cole, I'll go." For the first time since she met him, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of his lips. It wasn't polished, wasn't perfect. It was real. "Thank you," he said simply, and the weight in the room shifted. Naomi knew her choice would complicate everything, but some part of her, against reason, against fear, wanted to see where this road might lead. The Harrington estate rose from the hillside like something out of another life. Naomi's breath caught as the car rolled through iron gates that seemed taller than the hospital where she worked. Beyond them stretched a winding drive lined with manicured trees, each branch trimmed to perfection. At the end of the path, the mansion came into view, Grand stone walls, towering windows, and a front door large enough to swallow her entire apartment. Naomi smoothed her skirt nervously, clutching her modest bag tighter. She had prepared herself for extravagance, but nothing had readied her for this. The home radiated power, money, and history, things she had never been near, except on the pages of glossy magazines left in the hospital waiting room. When the driver opened her door, Naomi stepped onto the cobblestone with careful steps. Her flats felt out of place against the polished stone, her simple dress dull beside the gleam of luxury vehicles parked nearby. Cole walked ahead, his limp slight but noticeable, and glanced back at her. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" he said, his tone carrying a trace of irony. She nodded, unable to lie. "It's different from anything I've known." Inside, the scale of wealth pressed closer. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with intricate designs, while marble floors stretched endlessly underfoot. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared from gilded frames, their eyes following her every step. Servants moved quietly through the hallways, bowing slightly as Cole passed, their gazes flicking toward Naomi with a mix of curiosity and polite restraint. Naomi felt the weight of it all pressing against her shoulders. Her life had been small apartments, hand-me-down furniture, and late nights studying by a single lamp. Here every surface glimmered with money, every corner whispered privilege. But when she looked at Cole, she noticed something surprising. He didn't bask in it. If anything, his jaw tightened, his expression carrying the same weariness she had seen in the hospital. The grandeur might have impressed others, but to him it was a cage with golden bars. Naomi let out a breath, grounding herself. She belonged to neither this world nor its expectations. And yet she was here, not for the mansion, not for the wealth, but because of the man who had asked her to walk beside him. That evening the estate's vast halls felt less intimidating as Naomi followed Cole into a quieter corner of the mansion. They settled in a study where a fire burned steadily in the hearth, its warmth pushing back the chill that had lingered since the stormy night of their meeting. Cole lowered himself into an armchair with a faint wince, still recovering from his injuries, and gestured toward the sofa across from him. Naomi sat, tucking her legs neatly beneath her, her hands folded nervously in her lap. For a while, the room held only the crackle of the flames. Then Cole broke the silence. "You've probably guessed by now. This place doesn't feel like home to me." Naomi tilted her head, studying him. "It looks like something most people would dream of." "Dreams?" he said, with a bitter chuckle. "You'd be surprised how quickly they turn into chains when you don't get to choose them." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "This house is full of people, but I've never felt lonelier anywhere else." Naomi's heart softened. She thought of her own small apartment, the quiet hum of the fridge at night, the memory of her mother sitting at the kitchen table with weary eyes but a steady smile. That tiny space, with all its flaws, had still been home because love lived there. She cleared her throat gently. "I know loneliness too, but in a different way. My mother gave everything she had for me. She wanted me to become a doctor, but when she got sick, I had to settle for nursing school. The bills piled up, and my dreams, well, they had to wait." Cole's eyes lifted, searching hers. "You gave up your dreams for her?" Naomi nodded slowly. "For family, for love. Some things matter more than ambition." The firelight flickered across his face, softening his sharp features. "You're different from anyone I've ever known," he murmured, his voice quieter now. "You don't look at me like a Harrington. You look at me like—" His words trailed off, but the weight of them lingered in the space between them. Naomi shifted, her pulse quickening under his gaze. She hadn't meant to share so much, yet in his presence the words flowed. It was as if the fire wasn't the only thing warming the room. The unspoken trust building between them had its own heat. For the first time they weren't a nurse and a patient, or a billionaire and a woman from modest means. They were two souls, stripped of titles, speaking truths they hadn't dared to voice elsewhere. The fire crackled, filling the silence that followed their confessions. Naomi sat still, her hands resting in her lap, but her heart was racing. She felt his eyes on her, steady and unguarded, a look so different from the sharp sarcasm he had worn in the hospital. It was raw, vulnerable. Cole leaned back slowly, his gaze dropping for a moment before returning to her face. "I don't know why I'm telling you these things," he said quietly. "I've spent years holding everything in, but with you, it feels different." Naomi's breath caught, her throat tightening. She wanted to answer, but words refused to come. Instead, she found herself studying the faint scar above his brow, the curve of his jaw, the way the firelight softened the hardness he usually carried. A long pause stretched between them, filled with something unspoken yet undeniable. Naomi shifted slightly on the sofa, and Cole mirrored her movement, leaning forward as if pulled by a force neither could name. Her pulse thudded in her ears as he stopped halfway, searching her face. His hesitation was clear, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Tell me to stop, Naomi." But she didn't. She couldn't. Her chest rose with a shaky breath, and in that breath she gave her answer. Cole closed the gap, his lips brushing hers with a tenderness that startled them both. The kiss was hesitant at first, as if they were testing the fragile bond forming between them. Naomi's hands trembled as she lifted them, resting lightly against his arm. The world beyond that study, the wealth, the family pressures, the gossip she had feared, faded in that instant. All that remained was the warmth of the fire and the tentative touch of a man who had been lost until now. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads lingered close, their breaths mingling. Neither spoke, but the silence didn't feel empty. It was full of questions, of promises yet unspoken, of a love neither had planned but could no longer deny was beginning. After the kiss, neither of them moved for a long moment. The firelight painted soft shadows across the room, and Naomi could feel her own heartbeat against her ribs, loud and unsteady. Cole drew back slightly, as if giving her a chance to retreat, but she didn't. Instead, she reached for his hand. Her fingers slipped into his, and his grip tightened gently, as though anchoring himself. For a man who had nearly slipped away days ago, the act of holding hands seemed more powerful than anything wealth could buy. They sat that way in silence, their palms pressed together, their breathing slowly sinking. Cole's thumb brushed across the back of her hand, an unspoken thank you, an unspoken need. Naomi's eyes lifted to his, and for the first time she saw no walls, no sarcasm, only a man searching for comfort he hadn't known how to ask for. "Stay," he whispered, his voice low but clear. Naomi hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because the weight of the moment felt larger than both of them. Yet her heart answered before her mind could. She nodded. The night unfolded with closeness that wasn't rushed or forced. They shared quiet words, whispers about fears and hopes, promises neither had planned to make. Naomi told him she dreamed of finishing her studies one day, of opening a small clinic where no one would be turned away. Cole, with a faint smile, admitted he had never spoken of his loneliness to anyone, not even his family. As the fire dwindled to glowing embers, Naomi rested her head lightly against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her carefully, protective and sure, despite the bandages that still reminded them of how fragile life could be. There was no need for extravagance. The intimacy came in the way they lingered, the way they held on as though The world outside might try to break this fragile connection at dawn. Cole's last words before sleep took him were almost inaudible. "You make me feel alive again." Naomi closed her eyes, her hand still in his, her heart whispering back what her lips could not. Love doesn't always arrive when expected. It grows in the spaces between pain and healing, between confessions and quiet promises. For Naomi and Cole, it wasn't wealth, status, or power that began binding them together. It was the courage to let someone see their truest selves. Love often finds us when we least expect it, and when it does, it reshapes everything. The estate had quiet corners. Naomi often wandered when Cole rested. She liked to walk the long halls, studying the paintings or slipping into the garden to clear her head. That night, unable to sleep, she drifted toward the west wing, where faint voices carried. She paused at the edge of an open doorway, her heart thudding. Inside, Cole's parents sat in the drawing room, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. "Cole must understand his duty," his father said sharply, pacing across the rug. "The Harrington name is not built on sentiment, it is built on alliances. The Whitmore proposal is the perfect match. Their daughter is polished, educated, and comes from a family equal to ours." Naomi's stomach twisted, her grip tightening on the wall. His mother spoke more softly, but with the same resolve. "He is vulnerable now. We must guide him before he attaches himself to the wrong person." "Wrong person?" His father scoffed. "That nurse, what's her name?" "Naomi. She's already been far too close. He cannot be allowed to mistake her for anything more than a caregiver. We will not have scandal in this house." Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. She pressed back into the shadows, her breath caught in her chest. Their words sliced through her, each one heavier than the last. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Every instinct told her she shouldn't be here, that listening was a violation, but the truth clung to her ears like chains. They wanted Cole bound to someone else, someone deemed worthy, while she was nothing but a problem to be erased. Her throat tightened. She had known stepping into his world would carry risks, but hearing the disdain firsthand cut deeper than she expected. Their judgment wasn't about her heart, her character, or even the night she saved his life. It was about her place, her lack of wealth, her background. The words echoed long after she slipped silently back into the hall. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, fighting the urge to cry. For the first time, she wondered if she had been foolish to believe this. Connection could survive the weight of his family's expectations. Naomi paced the length of the guest room, her hands clenched into fists. The voices she had overheard still echoed in her mind, each word sharper than the last. Scandal, wrong person, just a nurse. She had thought she was prepared for whispers, but hearing them so clearly, spoken with such authority, stripped away her fragile hope. When Cole came looking for her the next morning, she sat rigidly by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. His voice was warm, curious. "You disappeared last night. I thought maybe you'd fallen asleep by the fire." She turned, her heart pounding. His concern only made what she had to say harder. "Cole, we need to talk." The seriousness in her tone stopped him cold. He stepped closer, studying her face. "What is it?" Naomi forced herself to meet his eyes, though her chest felt tight. "I heard your parents last night. They were talking about you, about arranging a marriage for you with someone they consider suitable." She swallowed hard before adding, "And they made it clear that I don't belong here." His brows drew together, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't have been listening." "I wasn't trying to," she cut in quickly, her voice trembling. "But I heard enough. They don't want me here, Cole. To them I'll never be enough, and I refuse to be the reason you fight with your family. You don't need that war on top of everything else." Cole's eyes darkened. his hands flexing at his sides. "Naomi, don't do this. Don't let their voices decide for us." She shook her head, the weight of reality pressing down. "This isn't about us, Cole. It's about the world you come from, the one I don't fit into. I'm a nurse who lives paycheck to paycheck. You're an heir to a fortune that carries expectations. They'll never accept me, and one day you may resent me for it." Her words hung heavy in the room. For a moment, silence stretched, filled only by the sound of her uneven breathing. Naomi turned toward the window again, blinking back the sting of tears. "I should step back before this goes any further, before it costs you more than you're ready to lose." Cole stared at her, as if her words had struck harder than any blow. His chest rose and fell, his breath sharp, his eyes stormy. For a man who had faced boardrooms, headlines, and family power plays, nothing had shaken him like Naomi's attempt to leave. He stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Do you know what it was like before you found me on that road? I wasn't living, Naomi. I was existing, dragged along by expectations I never chose. Every smile was forced, every word scripted, every breath felt like one more debt I owed to a family name." Naomi's lips parted, but she couldn't speak. His voice cracked as he continued. "That night when I asked why you saved me, it wasn't a question born of gratitude. It was disbelief. I didn't think anyone would bother. I didn't think my life mattered outside the Harrington Empire." He closed the space between them, his hand trembling as he reached for hers. She tried to pull back, but his grip tightened, not forcefully, but with desperation. "You make me feel alive," he said, each word deliberate, fierce. "For the first time in years, I laugh, and it feels real. I wake up and want to see someone's face. I breathe, and it doesn't feel like a chore. That's because of you." Her chest ached, torn between reason and the raw honesty in his voice. She saw it in his eyes. This wasn't a speech rehearsed for effect. It was a confession pulled from the deepest part of him. Cole's hand lifted to her cheek, his touch careful. "Don't step back, Naomi. Don't let them win. If I lose you because of their rules, then I might as well have died in that car." Her breath shuddered, tears threatening to spill. The walls she had tried to build crumbled under the weight of his truth. The air between them stayed heavy after his confession, their breaths uneven, hearts caught in the same storm. Naomi wanted to believe him, wanted to fall into the promise his words carried, but fear pressed harder. She lowered her gaze, searching for strength. "Cole," she whispered, her voice trembling, "there's something I haven't told you." His eyes narrowed, his grip on her hand steady. "What is it?" Naomi pressed her palm against her stomach, the gesture unintentional yet revealing. Cole followed the movement, his breath catching as realization flickered across his face. She forced the words out, each one heavy. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Naomi's heart raced, her throat dry, her eyes fixed on the floor. She expected anger, denial, maybe even retreat. Instead, Cole stepped closer, his expression unreadable but intense. "You're sure?" he asked, his tone firm but not accusing. Naomi nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I found out yesterday. I didn't know how to tell you, and after hearing your parents last night, I thought this would only make things worse. They already see me as unworthy. Now, with a baby, our baby, it'll be war." Her shoulders slumped, the weight of reality pressing down. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "I don't want to ruin your life, Cole." But Cole's reaction wasn't what she feared. His eyes sharpened, his jaw set with determination she hadn't seen before. He placed both hands on her shoulders, steady and unyielding. "You are not ruining my life," he said, his voice steady and fierce. "Naomi, this child, our child, is not a mistake or a burden. He or she is proof that something real came from the chaos. Proof that I can choose love over the prison they built for me." Naomi shook her head, overwhelmed. "But your family, they don't get to decide this," he cut in, his tone stronger than she'd ever heard. "This is ours, and I will stand by you no matter what it costs me." Her tears spilled freely now, but they weren't only from fear. They carried relief, too, relief that she wasn't facing this alone. Naomi wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers, but the tears kept falling. She had braced herself for rejection, for the cold dismissal his parents had warned would come if she strayed. Too close. Instead, she found herself staring at a man whose resolve only seemed to harden with every challenge. Cole cupped her face gently, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Naomi," he said, his voice steady though his jaw was tight, "our child will know love, not contracts. Do you hear me?" Her breath hitched, her heart torn between hope and fear. "But your family will never accept this. They'll say the baby is an accident, that I trapped you. They can say what they want," he cut in, his tone sharp. "I won't let them dictate how my child is raised. I've lived under their rules long enough, suffocating under decisions made in boardrooms and ballrooms. Not this time. Not with you. Not with our child." Naomi shook her head faintly, her hand pressing over his. "You're asking for a fight bigger than either of us." "I know," he admitted, his voice softening, "but I've never been more ready for one, because this fight is worth it." The intensity in his eyes unsettled her, but it also anchored her. He wasn't speaking as the bitter, guarded man she had first met. He was speaking as someone reborn, someone who finally had something to protect beyond himself. He took her hand and placed it over his chest, where his heartbeat thudded strong beneath her palm. "I owe you my life, Naomi. Now I owe this child a future, and I promise you both, whatever storms come, I will not walk away. This family of ours will be built on love, not power, not contracts, not control." Naomi's tears spilled again, but this time she didn't fight them. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest, and for the first time since overhearing his parents, she felt a fragile but steady sense of safety. It wasn't the end of the battle. She knew the whispers would grow louder, the opposition stronger. But with his arms around her and his vow echoing in her ears, she realized something vital. She wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, the estate was alive with movement, servants carrying trays, voices echoing faintly from the dining hall. Naomi sat by the window in her room, watching the manicured lawns stretch endlessly, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The reality of her new life pressed heavily against her. She wasn't only fighting for herself now, she was fighting for the child within her. Cole entered quietly, his presence filling the room. He crossed to her side and placed a hand over hers. The gesture was simple, but the conviction in his eyes spoke louder than words. "They'll try to separate us," he said. "They'll use every weapon they know, status, money, influence, but none of that matters. What matters is that we don't give in." Naomi searched his face, seeing both the fire of defiance and the vulnerability of a man daring to build a life of his own. "And what if we fail, Cole?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "We won't. Because love requires courage, Naomi. The kind of courage that stands even when the world tries to bend you. If we choose love every day, if we protect it, no one can take it from us." His words sank deep, steadying the fears that threatened to consume her. Love wasn't easy. It wasn't convenient. It came with battles and sacrifices. But in his eyes, she saw that it was worth every risk. Naomi placed her hand over his, squeezing gently. "Then we fight together." Cole nodded, and for the first time in years, he looked like a man unafraid of his own future. Love is not tested in comfort. It is tested when pressure comes from every direction. when family, society, or fear demands surrender. Choosing love in those moments takes courage, and it is in that courage that real families, real futures are built. Now, let me ask you, have you ever chosen love over expectations? Have you ever stood your ground when others told you it wasn't practical, acceptable, or wise? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe, like Naomi and Cole, that love deserves courage, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. The Harrington dining hall was grand, its vaulted ceiling echoing every sound, but that night it felt more like an arena. Cole sat across from his parents at the long polished table, Naomi at his side, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The air was heavy, sharpened by disapproval that radiated from his father's rigid posture and his mother's cool, composed stare. "You've embarrassed this family," his father snapped, slamming his palm against the table. "Parading her here, announcing a child out of wedlock. Do you have any idea what this will do to our name?" Naomi flinched, but Cole reached for her hand beneath the table, steadying her. His jaw was set, his eyes locked on his father. "This isn't about your name. This is about my life." His mother's voice, though softer, cut just as deep. "Cole, you've always been emotional, reckless, but this is unacceptable. The Whitmore Alliance is waiting. You cannot throw it all away for sentiment." Cole's temper flared. "Sentiment? Naomi saved my life when no one else was there. She stayed when I had nothing to offer her, not money, not promises, and now she carries our child. That is not sentiment. That is family." His father leaned forward, his glare piercing. "Family is legacy, alliances, power. Do you think the world respects us because of kindness? No, it respects us because of strength, and strength means sacrifice." Cole stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the marble floor. His voice thundered, unshaken. "I will not sacrifice Naomi. I will not sacrifice my child. If keeping your empire means abandoning them, then I don't want it." Naomi's heart pounded as the silence stretched, broken only by the fire crackling in the corner. Cole's words hung in the air like a final verdict. For the first time, she saw his parents falter. His mother's eyes flickered with something almost human. Fear, maybe, sorrow, but his father's jaw clenched tighter, unwilling to yield. Cole drew Naomi to her feet and faced them both squarely. "This is the last time I'll sit at this table under your terms. From now on, I build my own." Without waiting for permission, without seeking approval, he led Naomi out of the hall, his grip on her hand strong and sure. Behind them, the silence of the Harringtons was louder than any words. Walking out of the Harrington estate wasn't just a dramatic exit, it was the start of a battle that would test Cole in every way. The moment he cut ties with his family's fortune, doors that once opened easily slammed shut. Business partners who had respected his last name stopped taking calls. Banks that had fought for his signature now declined his applications. For the first time in his life, he had nothing but his determination. Naomi stood by him through it all. She watched him spend nights hunched over a laptop at their modest apartment, sketching plans, making phone calls, building contacts from the ground up. His ideas were bold: investments in tech startups, real estate projects, and new ventures others thought were too risky. Without the Harrington shield, every deal was harder to win. But Cole pushed forward. There were setbacks, contracts falling through, investors pulling out at the last second, whispers in the business world mocking the fallen heir. Naomi saw the frustration in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. But she also saw the fire that had been missing when he lived under his father's thumb. This was his fight, his vision, and he refused to let anyone else control it. Naomi often reminded him, When exhaustion threatened to break him, it doesn't have to be perfect overnight. What matters is that it's yours. Those words steadied him, pushing him to get up each morning and keep going. Months turned into years, and slowly Cole's work began to bear fruit. One successful deal led to another. The same people who had dismissed him started paying attention again. But this time not because of his last name, because of his results. He was building something real, something unshakable, brick by brick. Naomi watched with quiet pride. He wasn't just proving his worth to the world, he was proving it to himself. And though money began flowing again, the look in his eyes told her what mattered most: freedom. He was finally living on his own terms, and she was proud to be beside him every step of the way. The new life Cole chose was anything but easy. Gone were the days of private chefs and endless staff. Their apartment was small, the furniture second-hand, and the bills constant. For Naomi, none of it mattered. She had lived with less before. What mattered was the man sitting across from her at the kitchen table every night, exhausted yet determined to fight another day. When Cole's deals collapsed or negotiations turned cold, it was Naomi who reminded him of his worth. She brewed late-night coffee while he pored over spreadsheets. She massaged his shoulders when frustration stiffened them. She listened when he spoke of doubts, letting him empty the weight he carried without judgment. There were nights when the stress was unbearable. Cole would bury his face in his hands, muttering that maybe his father had been right, that maybe he wasn't cut out for this. Naomi always answered firmly, her voice steady despite her own fears. "You're more than their name, Cole. You're building something real. Don't let their doubt become yours." Her quiet faith anchored him. She balanced his chaos with calm, his storms with patience. She even picked up extra shifts at the hospital to ease the strain, slipping grocery money into his wallet when he wasn't looking. She never boasted, never complained. She believed in him fiercely, even when the world didn't. And Cole noticed. Every time he caught her watching him with that soft, unwavering gaze, he felt a surge of strength. She wasn't here for wealth or status, she was here for him. It humbled him, sharpened his resolve, and reminded him what he was fighting for. Through every failure, Naomi remained. Through every victory, she celebrated with quiet joy, never asking for more than his honesty and love. In those moments, Cole realized something his parents had never understood. True partnership isn't about convenience or power, it's about standing in the fire together, no matter how hot the flames grow. Years of effort slowly reshaped Cole's life, but nothing compared to the day Naomi went into labor. The sterile white walls of the maternity ward couldn't dull the intensity of the moment. Cole paced the floor with restless energy, his usual composure shattered as he waited to hear the first cry of their child. When it came, sharp and full of life, he nearly collapsed with relief. The nurse placed the newborn in Naomi's arms, his tiny body swaddled. His fists clenched tight, as if ready to fight the world already. Tears blurred Naomi's vision as she looked down at her son. "Eli," she whispered. "Welcome, little one." Cole moved closer, his chest tight, as he gazed at the boy who had changed everything before even taking his first breath. "Eli Harrington," he murmured, brushing a hand across the baby's cheek. "The strongest heartbeat I've ever heard." The next morning the headlines spread like wildfire. Harrington Heir reborn, meet the youngest billionaire successor. Articles plastered Eli's name across financial journals and society pages, hailing him as the child who would inherit the empire Cole had abandoned. Cole read the papers with a grim smile, then tossed them aside. "They'll never understand," he told Naomi as she cradled Eli. "To them he's an heir. To us he's our son. And that's all that matters." Naomi smiled through her exhaustion, her voice gentle. "Let them write what they want. What Eli will remember is the love he was born into, not the fortune attached to his name. In that quiet hospital room, the world outside seemed distant. Cole leaned down to kiss Naomi's forehead, his hand resting lightly on their son. For the first time, he wasn't haunted by his family's expectations or the weight of legacy. He was simply a father, overwhelmed by the beauty of the life they had created together. The hospital room was quiet again, the bustle of nurses fading as the night settled. Naomi rested against the pillows, exhaustion clear in her eyes, but her arms held Eli with a tenderness that made Cole's chest ache. He sat at her side, his hand covering hers as he studied the tiny features of their son. Cole's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "Do you remember what I said that night on the road?" Naomi looked at him, her eyes soft. "You asked me why I saved you." He nodded, his gaze locked on her. "I understand now. It wasn't just about pulling me from that wreck. You didn't just save my life, Naomi. You gave me a reason to live." His hand brushed her cheek, his thumb tracing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Everything I've built, everything I'll fight for, it's because of you and him." Naomi's throat tightened, her heart swelling at his words. She leaned into his touch, her voice trembling. "And you gave me the kind of love I never thought I'd find." Cole leaned closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then to Eli's tiny hand. The baby stirred, his small fingers curling around Cole's thumb, anchoring him to the new future they had chosen together. In that moment, there was no wealth, no Harrington legacy, no whispers of scandal. There was only a man, a woman, and a child bound by love and sacrifice, proof that true legacies are not written in contracts or bank accounts, but in the lives we nurture and the values we pass on. A family is not defined by wealth or power, but by the love that shapes it. True legacies are built on sacrifice, loyalty, and the courage to choose love even when the world demands otherwise. Before we close this story, let me ask you, do you agree that love is stronger than money? If you do, type it in the comments. Love is stronger than money. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes in love, and subscribe so you'll always be here for stories that remind us what truly matters.